Did you know that Don Bosco actually met Saint Philip Neri? The two saints had a conversation as they were walking through the hills just outside of Rome, which inspired Don Bosco to follow his mission to educate boys and start his famous oratory. But if Saint Philip Neri died in 1595, how in the world did Don Bosco encounter him as a young man of 18 more than 200 years later in 1841? It was through a heavenly vision sent from God. We'll learn all about this pivotal moment in Don Bosco's life, but I would first like to give you some background on Saint Philip Neri and show you why he was such an amazing saint. The Miracles and Prophecies of St. John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Subscribe for new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Whenever Don Bosco would preach about Saint Philip Neri to the oratory boys, they saw his own likeness mirrored in his words. And whenever he referred to the saintly endeavors of this great man, they would whisper, "That's just like Don Bosco." Saint Philip Neri, Rome's renowned apostle and friend of youth, used to tell his boys, "Give me a lad who will trust me with just 2 inches of his head, and I will make a great saint of him." He would also say, "Shout and make all the noise you want, but don't commit sin." His boys carried out his advice with great zest, but at times a lay brother would tear out of his quarters to scold them for their racket as they dashed through the corridors and knocked things over. "You rascals," he would shriek, "is this the way to behave, breaking everything in sight?" But they ignored him and carried on as before with deafening noise. They had their director's permission, and that was all that mattered to them. Seeing that they had no intention to obey him, the lay brother would go to Saint Philip Neri and indignantly say, "I want you to come and scold those scamps. Can't you see they're tearing the house down?" The saint would call them over and say, "Listen, my sons, stay still if you can and don't scream too loudly." The boys would scatter for new and noisier games, while the poor brother would withdraw discomfited and muttering. Were it not for the fact that Saint Philip Neri constantly and earnestly told his confreres, never let the boys be idle during recreation, the brother would have used forceful means to end that rumpus. He gave the young people 5 reminders to preserve the virtue of purity. Flee from bad company, do not pamper the body with dainty food, escape idleness, offer frequent prayers, and go often to the sacraments, especially confession. On one occasion, a woman confessed sins of slander to Saint Philip Neri and asked for a cure of this bad habit. He said, "Buy a freshly killed chicken and pluck its feathers along the way as you come back to me." She did what he had said and returned to him with the plucked chicken. "Now go back," he said, "and bring me all the feathers you have scattered." "But I can't," she replied. "That's impossible. I cast the feathers carelessly, and the wind carried them away. How can I ever recover them?" He answered, "You cannot, and so it is with your words of scandal. They have been carried about in every direction. You cannot recall them, so go and slander no more." These stories show that he was a man of profound wisdom, and he had a thirst for souls. He was Florentine by birth, and at 18 was sent to work with a well-to-do uncle. It was then that Philip had a mystical experience which he called his conversion. All taste for earthly things left him, and he subsequently made his way on foot to Rome. There he found lodgings at the house of one Galeotto Caccia and taught his children in return for his keep. For the next 2 years, Philip led the life of a virtual recluse, giving up whole days and nights to prayer and contemplation. When he did emerge from his room, he immersed himself in the study of philosophy and theology, determined to live for God alone. He then started an apostolate, first at street corners talking to all who would listen, and then with young Florentines working in Rome. In 1548, with the help of his confessor, Father Persiano Rosa, Philip founded a confraternity of poor laymen, popularized the devotion of the 40 hours, and undertook the care of pilgrims in need. Greatly blessed, this work developed into the celebrated hospital of Santa Trinita dei Pellegrini. He was ordained on May 23, 1551, and became known for the gift of reading the thoughts of his penitents. As the number of conversions increased, he began to give regular conferences. He died in 1595, But this incredible man would appear in a vision to another great saint 200 years later. He would inspire St. John Bosco to spurn well-paid positions and pursue his God-given mission to educate the youth. But before we hear about Don Bosco's dream, if you'd like to enroll in our Saturday Mass intentions for the promoters of St. John Bosco, just click on the link in the description below. Or you can wait till the end of the video and click on the logo that should appear on the screen. At that time, St. John Bosco was 26 years old and had just become a priest. He had been offered 3 positions. The first was to be a teacher in the house of a noble Genoese gentleman with a salary of 1,000 liras a year. Relatives and friends tried to convince his mother, Margarita, to persuade Don Bosco about the advantages of accepting this position. He would be provided with food and clothing, and the significant stipend would improve his family's condition. Margaret replied, "My son in the house of a gentleman? What would he do with 1,000 lire? What would his brother or I do with it if John lost his soul?" He was offered the office of chaplain in his township of Morialdo. The townspeople insisted that they were ready to double his salary to keep him with them. His third offer was to be the vice curate in Castelnuovo. For a matter of such importance, Don Bosco decided to go to Turin to seek advice from St. Joseph Cafasso to know and do the will of God. The holy priest was professor of morals at the Convito Ecclesiastico, a finishing school for priests. Don Bosco told him about the offers of good stipends, the insistence of relatives and friends, and his disposition to devote himself entirely to evangelical work. St. Joseph Cafasso replied without a moment's hesitation, "You need to study morals and preaching. For now, give up all these proposals and come to the Convito Ecclesiastico." And so it was that Don Bosco moved away from Castelnuovo, confiding in God, whose ways are beautiful, and in all his paths there is peace. He had no money in his pocket, yet he confidently walked toward Turin. This move seemed to be related to a dream or vision in which Saint Philip Neri had appeared to him. Don Bosco found himself standing on a hill outside Rome. The city stretched out before him. Nearby, he saw a young man absorbed in serious thoughts, with his gaze fixed on that splendid panorama. Don Bosco approached him and said, "Young man, who are you, and what are you gazing at so intently?" "I am a poor stranger. I gaze upon this great city, and a thought occupies my mind, but I fear it's either too foolish or too bold." "What is this thought?" "To dedicate myself to doing good to so many poor souls, so many poor children, who, for lack of religious instruction, walk the road to perdition." "Do you have an education?" "I had a bit of schooling, but am not counted among the learned." "Do you have financial means?" "Nothing. I have not a morsel of bread outside of what my master charitably gives me every day." "Do you have churches or houses?" "I have nothing but a low, narrow room, the use of which I am charitably granted. My wardrobe consists of a rope pulled from one wall to another, where I place my clothes." "How then can you undertake such a task if you are unknown, uneducated, and without money?" "Indeed, the lack of means and merit worries me, but God inspires me with courage. God, who can raise sons of Abraham from stones, can accomplish his will through me, if he so wishes." "Do you love Our Lady?" At this point, Don Bosco described the young man's features, the flash of his eyes, his smile, and his affirmative answer. Don Bosco ended by asking him, "And what's your name?" "Philip Neri," the young man answered. Don Bosco saw his own mission mirrored in Saint Philip Neri's. Don Bosco felt the call of God from his earliest days and, following it, stayed the course throughout his life. Let us never lose confidence in God and Our Lady, trusting that they will provide us with the means to accomplish their will. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you'd like to enroll in our Saturday Mass intentions for the promoters of St. John Bosco, just click on the link above me here. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you. Come on, boy.